My name is Margaret Henderson, but everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 68 years old, and I never thought I'd be standing on my own front porch, locked out of the house I've lived in for 40 years, with nothing but the clothes on my back and $17 in my pocket. My daughter Rachel had just stolen my entire pension check, $1,200, and changed the locks while I was at my doctor's appointment. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that I trusted her completely, and I never saw it coming. This is the story of how my own flesh and blood betrayed me, and how I fought to reclaim not just my home, but my dignity. The autumn morning sun filtered through my kitchen curtains, casting warm shadows across the worn linoleum floor that Tom and I had installed 30 years ago. I stood at the stove, scrambling eggs the way Rachel had loved them as a child, soft and buttery with just a pinch of salt. My daughter sat at the kitchen table, her phone face down beside her coffee mug, which was strange. Rachel was always glued to that phone. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important," Rachel said, her voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. It was the voice she used when she wanted something. I turned from the stove, spatula in hand, and studied her face. Rachel had my eyes, the same hazel green that changed color depending on the light, but lately those eyes had looked tired, worried. Dark circles shadowed them, and her sandy blonde hair, usually perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" I divided the eggs onto 2 plates and brought them to the table, settling into the chair across from her. Rachel pushed her eggs around with her fork, not meeting my gaze. "Derek and I have been under so much stress lately. His business has been struggling, and I've been working double shifts at the hospital. We need a break, Mom. A real break." I nodded sympathetically, reaching across to pat her hand. Derek was Rachel's boyfriend of 2 years, a contractor who always seemed to have grand plans that never quite materialized. I'd never warmed to him, but I kept my opinions to myself. Rachel was a grown woman after all. "I understand, honey. Everyone needs rest sometimes. Maybe you two could take a weekend trip? There are some lovely bed and breakfasts up in the mountains." "Actually," Rachel interrupted, finally looking at me, "we were thinking of something bigger. There's this amazing resort in the Bahamas. 5 days all-inclusive. It would be perfect, Mom. I could really recharge, come back ready to handle everything better." My heart sank a little. I knew where this was going. "That sounds wonderful, Rachel, but those kinds of trips can be expensive. That's what I wanted to talk to you about." Rachel leaned forward, her eyes suddenly bright with enthusiasm. "Your pension check comes in 3 days, right? I was hoping. Maybe you could lend me the money. Just this once. I'll pay you back, I promise. Derek's got this big job lined up for next month, and once that comes through, we'll be fine." I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly gone. My monthly pension check was $1,200, all I had to live on. It covered my property taxes, utilities, groceries, and medications for my blood pressure and arthritis. Tom's life insurance had paid off the house before he passed 5 years ago, which was the only reason I could manage on such a small amount. "Rachel, honey, that's my entire pension check. I need that money for—" "I know, Mom, I know." Rachel's voice took on a desperate edge. She grabbed both my hands across the table, squeezing them tightly. "But I'll pay you back before the end of the month. And look, you've got food in the pantry, the house is paid for, and your next check will come in 30 days. You can manage for 1 month, right? I really need this." I looked into my daughter's pleading eyes and felt the familiar tug of maternal guilt. Rachel had been struggling since her divorce from Emma's father 10 years ago. She worked hard at the hospital, picked up extra shifts, and I knew she was trying to build a life with Derek. Maybe this trip would help her, give her the peace she needed. "What about Emma?" I asked. "She'll need lunch money, gas money for that car you bought her. Emma's at her dad's this month, remember? He's got everything covered." Rachel squeezed my hands again. "Please, Mom. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. You know I wouldn't." I thought about the pantry, reasonably well stocked from my last shopping trip. I thought about my medication bottles, both half full. I could make it work, couldn't I? Stretch things a little further? Rachel was my only child, my only family besides Emma. If I couldn't help her, who would? "All right," I heard myself say, and Rachel's face lit up like a Christmas tree. But you promise you'll pay me back before the end of the month? I'll need that money for next month's bills. I promise, Mom. I absolutely promise. Rachel jumped up and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're the best mom in the entire world. As she released me and sat back down, chattering excitedly about the resort and the beaches, I pushed away the small voice in my head that whispered warnings. This was my daughter. She would never let me down. Looking back now, I realized that was the moment everything started to fall apart. 3 days later, I stood in line at First National Bank on Maple Street, my worn leather purse clutched against my chest. The bank was busy for a Wednesday morning. Mostly elderly folks like myself, collecting their monthly checks and paying bills. I recognized several faces from my neighborhood, exchanging polite nods and small smiles. Rachel had insisted on meeting me at the bank. She said it would be easier to transfer the money directly rather than dealing with cash. Safer too, Mom, she'd said on the phone that morning. You shouldn't be walking around with $1,200 in your purse. When I reached the teller window, a young woman with bright red lipstick and a name tag reading Ashley greeted me warmly. Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. Here for your pension check. Yes, dear. But I'll be transferring most of it to my daughter's account today. Ashley's fingers flew across her keyboard, and within moments my check was deposited. I felt Rachel's presence beside me before I saw her. She had a way of filling a space with nervous energy. Hi, Mom. Rachel kissed my cheek, smelling of expensive perfume I knew she couldn't afford. Ready to do this? I turned to Ashley. I need to transfer $1,100 to my daughter's account, please. I'll keep $100 for myself. Ashley glanced between us, her professional smile flickering slightly. Mrs. Henderson, are you sure? That's almost your entire check. We have to ask these questions. It's bank policy to make sure. She's sure, Rachel interrupted, her voice sharp, then softer. Right, Mom? We talked about this. Yes, I'm sure, I confirmed, though my stomach churned with anxiety. It's just a loan. She's paying me back at the end of the month. Ashley processed the transfer, and I watched the numbers on the screen change. $1,100 moved from my account into Rachel's with a few keystrokes. Just like that, my security for the month vanished. Derek's waiting in the car, Rachel said as we left the bank, her arm linked through mine. We're heading straight to the airport from here. Our flight leaves in 3 hours. Already? I felt a pang of surprise. I thought you weren't leaving until tomorrow. Change of plans. We got a better deal on the flights. Rachel walked me to my old Honda Civic, parked in the back corner of the lot. Listen, Mom, I left some casseroles in your freezer, okay? That should help with food. She hugged me quickly, distractedly, already pulling away toward Derek's truck idling near the bank entrance. I could see him behind the wheel, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky, not even bothering to wave. Rachel, wait, I called after her, but she was already jogging toward the truck. Love you, Mom. I'll call you when we land. She blew me a kiss and climbed into the passenger seat. I stood in the parking lot and watched them drive away, Derek's truck leaving faint traces of exhaust in the cool October air. A maple leaf drifted down from the tree above me, landing on my windshield, brilliant red, like a warning I didn't know how to read. That evening I checked my freezer. There were no casseroles. Rachel had forgotten, or maybe she'd never made them at all. I stood there with the freezer door open, cold air washing over me, and felt the first real flicker of doubt. Pushed it away. She was my daughter. She would keep her promise. 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended quiet. Rachel called twice from the Bahamas. Short, breathless conversations filled with descriptions of turquoise water and poolside cocktails. She sounded happy, lighter than I'd heard her in years. I didn't mention that I was rationing my groceries, or that I'd skipped refilling one of my prescriptions to save money. We extended the trip by 3 days, Mom. Isn't that wonderful? Derek surprised me, she gushed during the second call. I'd smiled into the phone, ignoring the anxiety twisting in my chest. That's lovely, sweetheart. You deserve it. Now, on a gray Thursday morning, I sat in Dr. Harrison's office for my quarterly checkup. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. I'd almost canceled the appointment. It seemed like an unnecessary expense to drive the 15 miles to the medical complex. But Dr. Harrison had been Tom's doctor too, and I trusted him. "Margaret, your blood pressure is elevated," Dr. Harrison said, frowning at his tablet as I sat on the examination table, paper crinkling beneath me. He was in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Have you been taking your medication as prescribed?" I looked down at my hands, age-spotted and wrinkled, folded in my lap. "I've been taking it most days." "Most days?" His frown deepened. "Margaret, you need to take it every day. Your hypertension is nothing to play around with. You know this." "I know, doctor. I trailed off, embarrassed to admit I'd let my prescription run out because I'd given my medication money to my daughter for a vacation. Dr. Harrison set down his tablet and pulled up a stool, sitting so we were eye level. This was what I'd always appreciated about him. He never talked down to his patients, literally or figuratively. "Is everything all right? Financially, I mean. There are programs that can help with medication costs if you're struggling." Tears pricked my eyes unexpectedly. My daughter needed help. I gave her my pension check. She's supposed to pay me back at the end of the month, and then everything will be fine. The doctor's expression shifted. Not judgmental but concerned. "Margaret, you gave away your entire pension check?" "Not all of it. I kept $100. Even as I said it, I heard how foolish it sounded. Dr. Harrison was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "I'm going to give you samples of your blood pressure medication to get you through the next few weeks. But Margaret, you need to be careful. You can't help anyone if you're not taking care of yourself first." I took the sample packets gratefully, fighting back tears. "Thank you, doctor." The appointment lasted another 20 minutes. Routine checks, gentle warnings about my health, reminders to eat properly and take my medications. When I finally left his office, the gray sky had turned to drizzle. I drove home slowly, my old Honda's windshield wipers squeaking rhythmically. The medical complex was on the far side of town, and the drive took me past the high school where I'd taught English for 30 years before retiring. Past the diner where Tom and I had eaten breakfast every Sunday morning. Past the library where I still volunteered on Tuesday afternoons. All of it looked different somehow, seen through the lens of my new reality, the reality where I'd given away my financial security and was counting on a promise that felt increasingly fragile. When I pulled onto Sycamore Street, my street, something felt wrong. I couldn't identify it at first, just a prickle of unease at the back of my neck. Then I saw it. Derek's truck was parked in my driveway, but Rachel had said they weren't coming back until tomorrow. I checked the date on my car's dashboard. Thursday, October 26th. They weren't supposed to return until Friday the 27th. My heart began to pound as I parked on the street, staring at my little white house with its blue shutters and the porch swing Tom had built. Derek's truck sat in my driveway like an unwelcome visitor, and through my living room window I could see movement. I grabbed my purse and the medication samples, walking up my front path on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. The garden gnome beside my mailbox, the one Emma had given me for Mother's Day 5 years ago, lay on its side in the grass. I reached my front door and turned the knob. It didn't move. I tried again, jiggling the handle. Locked. But I never locked my door when I left for short appointments. Living on a quiet street in a small town, I'd never worried much about security. I fished my house key from my purse with trembling fingers and inserted it into the lock. It didn't fit. I pulled the key out, stared at it and tried again. The key went into the lock but wouldn't turn. It was as if someone had changed the locks. I knocked on my own door softly at first, then harder. "Rachel? Rachel, are you in there?" "It's Mom." No answer. But I could see shadows moving inside, hear muffled voices. I knocked again, louder. "Rachel. Derek. I know you're in there. Open this door right now." The door swung open so suddenly I stumbled backward. Derek stood in the doorway, filling it with his broad frame. He wore a tank top that showed off tattooed arms, and his expression was cold, almost amused. "Can I help you?" he asked, as if I were a stranger selling magazine subscriptions. What's going on? Why won't my key work?" I pushed past him into my own living room and stopped dead. Everything was wrong. My living room had been transformed into something unrecognizable. The floral couch Tom and I had bought 20 years ago was shoved against the wall, covered with Derek's tools and paint cans. My collection of family photos, 40 years of memories in silver frames, had been taken down from the mantel and stacked carelessly in a cardboard box on the floor. The coffee table where Emma did her homework was covered with beer bottles and takeout containers. "What have you done?" I whispered, my voice barely working. Rachel emerged from the kitchen carrying a trash bag. She wore yoga pants and one of Derek's oversized shirts, her hair piled on top of her head. When she saw me, she froze. "Mom, you're back early." "Early?" I found my voice, and it came out louder than I'd intended. "Rachel, what is going on? Why is Derek's truck in my driveway? Why won't my key work? What have you done to my house?" Rachel set down the trash bag and glanced at Derek, who had moved to stand beside her. They exchanged a look I couldn't read, and my stomach dropped. "Mom, sit down. We need to talk." Rachel gestured to my couch, but I couldn't move toward it through the mess. "I don't want to sit down. I want to know what's happening." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. "You said you'd be back tomorrow. You said you'd pay me back at the end of the month. You..." "Plans changed," Derek interrupted, his voice flat and emotionless. "Rachel and I have been talking. We're moving in here." The room tilted. "Moving in? What do you mean moving in? This is my house." "Actually," Rachel said, and her voice had changed, gone cold in a way I'd never heard from her before. "We've been looking into it, and legally you can't afford to keep this house. Your pension barely covers the property taxes and utilities. You're living on nothing, Mom. It's not sustainable." "That's because I gave you $1,100. I shouted, my hands shaking. "That's my entire month's budget. You promised." "I can't pay you back," Rachel said flatly. "The trip cost more than we expected. And honestly, Mom, you shouldn't have given us money you couldn't afford to lose." I stared at my daughter, this woman who looked like Rachel but sounded like a stranger, and couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. "You asked me for it. You promised you'd pay me back. You said Derek had a big job coming." Derek laughed, an ugly sound. "That job fell through. These things happen. So you changed my locks? While I was at the doctor." The reality of it was sinking in now, filling me with a cold, creeping horror. "We're helping you, Mom," Rachel said, and she had the audacity to sound annoyed. "You can't take care of this place by yourself anymore. Derek and I will live here, maintain the property, and you can stay in the guest room. It'll be better for everyone." The guest room. The tiny back bedroom, barely 10 feet by 10 feet, with no closet and a window that looked out at the neighbor's fence. They wanted me to live in the guest room of my own house. "You can't do this," I said, but my voice came out weak, uncertain. "This is my house. Tom and I bought it 40 years ago. We raised you here, Rachel. This is my home. And now it'll be our home too," Derek said. He picked up a beer bottle from my coffee table and took a long drink, maintaining eye contact with me the entire time. It was a power move, deliberate and cruel. "You should be grateful we're willing to take care of you." Grateful. The word exploded out of me. "You stole my money. You changed my locks. You want me to be grateful?" "We didn't steal anything," Rachel snapped. "You gave us that money. You transferred it yourself at the bank. Remember? There's no crime here, Mom. Just a family arrangement that isn't working out the way you hoped." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. How had this happened? When had Rachel become someone capable of this? "Get out," I said quietly. "Both of you. Get out of my house right now, or I'm calling the police." Derek and Rachel exchanged another glance. Then Derek smiled, and it was the most frightening expression I'd ever seen. "Go ahead," he said. "Call the cops." "Tell them what? That your daughter and her boyfriend are moving into your house? That you willingly gave us money? There's no crime here, lady. And you know what? We've been here for 3 days already. We're established residents now." 3 days. My mind reeled. "But you were in the Bahamas." "We came back early," Rachel said. "Decided it was time to make some changes. Look, Mom, you have 2 choices. You can stay here in the guest room and we'll all live together, or you can leave. But either way, Derek and I are staying. You can't kick me out of my own house." "We're not kicking you out," Rachel said, her voice taking on a patient, condescending tone that made me want to scream. "We're offering you a place to stay. The guest room is yours. But if you can't accept that, well, Maybe you'd be better off somewhere else. I stood in the middle of my destroyed living room, surrounded by the evidence of their invasion, and felt reality crumbling around me. This couldn't be happening. This was my daughter, my baby girl, the child I'd rocked to sleep and helped with homework and cheered for at soccer games. Rachel, please? I whispered. And I hated the begging tone in my voice but couldn't stop it. Please don't do this. We can talk about this. We can figure something out. But please don't take my home. For just a moment I saw something flicker in Rachel's eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But then Derek put his arm around her shoulders, and her expression hardened again. The guest room, Mom. That's the offer. Take it or leave it. I looked at them both, standing united against me in my own living room, and made a decision. I'm leaving. But I'm coming back with the police. I turned toward the door, my legs shaking so badly I could barely walk. Behind me I heard Derek's voice, lazy and amused. Good luck with that. I stepped out onto my porch, and the door slammed shut behind me. I heard the new lock click into place. The lock on my own door, the door Tom had painted blue because it was my favorite color. I stood there for a long moment, my purse clutched to my chest, the sample medications rattling inside. The October wind had picked up, scattering leaves across my lawn. Mrs. Chun, my neighbor across the street, was standing in her yard, staring at me with concern. I had nowhere to go. No money, no home, and no idea what to do next. I stood on my porch, frozen, as the afternoon sun broke briefly through the clouds before disappearing again. My hands trembled so violently I could barely hold my purse. Behind me I could hear Derek and Rachel moving around inside, laughing, actually laughing, while I stood locked out of my own home. Maggie? Maggie, honey, are you okay? Linda Chin's voice cut through my paralysis. I looked up to see my neighbor hurrying across the street, her gray cardigan flapping behind her. Linda was 72, a retired nurse who'd lived across from me for 20 years. We'd shared countless cups of coffee, swapped recipes, and comforted each other through our husbands' deaths. Linda, I managed to say, and then my voice broke completely. She took one look at my face and immediately wrapped her arm around my shoulders. Come on. Come to my house. Right now. I let her guide me across the street, my legs moving mechanically. I glanced back once and saw Derek standing at my living room window, watching us with his arms crossed. The sight of him in my house behind my windows sent a fresh wave of horror through me. Linda's house smelled like jasmine tea and the lemon cookie she was always baking. She settled me on her couch, wrapped an afghan around my shoulders even though I wasn't cold, and pressed a cup of hot tea into my hands. Now, she said, sitting beside me, tell me everything. The story poured out. The loan, the promises, coming home to find my locks changed and my house taken over. Linda listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. That son of a bitch, she muttered when I finished. Linda rarely cursed, so hearing it now somehow made everything more real. And Rachel. Oh, Maggie, I can't believe Rachel would do this to you. I need to call the police, I said, setting down the untouched tea. My hands had steadied slightly, anger beginning to burn through the shock. They broke into my house. They changed my locks. That's illegal, isn't it? Let's call right now. Linda stood and grabbed her cordless phone, punching in 911. 20 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up in front of my house. Officer Patricia Mills was a sturdy woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an air of competence that made me feel, for the first moment in hours, that things might be okay. Linda and I met her on my front lawn. Across the street, a few neighbors had come out onto their porches watching. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door to Linda, stood with her arms crossed, shaking her head disapprovingly. Tom and I had lived on this street for 40 years. Everyone knew me here, knew this was my house. Mrs. Henderson? Officer Mills shook my hand. You reported that someone has locked you out of your residence? My daughter and her boyfriend, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded now. They changed the locks while I was at a doctor's appointment. I can't get into my own house. Officer Mills made notes on a small tablet. And this is definitely your house? You're the legal owner. Yes. Tom, my late husband, and I bought it 40 years ago. It's paid off. My name is on the deed. I fumbled in my purse for my wallet, pulling out my driver's license with this address on it. Okay. Officer Mills studied the license, then looked at the house. Let me go talk to the occupants. I watched Linda gripping my hand as Officer Mills walked up my front path and knocked on the door. Rachel opened it after a moment, and I could see her expression shift from annoyed to carefully concerned. The conversation lasted several minutes. I couldn't hear most of it, but I saw Rachel gesture animatedly, saw her wipe at her eyes as if crying. Derek appeared behind her, his posture aggressive but his voice too low to carry. Finally, Officer Mills walked back to us. Her expression was apologetic, and my heart sank before she even spoke. Mrs. Henderson, I'm sorry, but this is a civil matter. Your daughter says you gave her permission to stay in the house, that this is a family dispute about living arrangements. She claims you gave her money willingly, and that she's been helping you because you can't maintain the property alone. That's not true, I said desperately. She stole from me. She changed the locks without telling me. She says she changed the locks for security reasons after you gave her a key. She says you've been having memory problems lately, and she's concerned about your well-being. Memory problems. Rachel had told the police I had memory problems. The betrayal of it took my breath away. I don't have memory problems, I said firmly. Officer, this is my house. I was locked out without warning. How is that not illegal? If you're the sole owner of the property, you can pursue a civil eviction, Officer Mills explained. But I can't remove them based on a family dispute. You'd need a court order. I'm sorry, Mrs. Henderson. I wish I could do more. So they can just steal my house? My voice rose. They can just take over, and there's nothing you can do? It's not a criminal matter, Officer Mills repeated gently. This is unfortunate and I believe you. But without evidence of a crime or a court order, my hands are tied. You should contact an attorney first thing tomorrow morning. Get an eviction process started. But for tonight. She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. For tonight I'm homeless, I finished flatly. Officer Mills glanced at Linda. Does she have somewhere to stay? She can stay with me, Linda said immediately, squeezing my hand tighter. Of course she can stay with me. After Officer Mills left, after giving me a card with victim advocacy resources and suggesting I document everything, I stood on Linda's porch and stared at my house. The sun was setting now, painting the sky orange and pink. Through my kitchen window I could see Rachel moving around, probably making dinner in my kitchen, using my dishes, living my life. Come inside, Maggie, Linda said softly. We'll figure this out. Tomorrow we'll find you a lawyer. But as I followed Linda into her house, my temporary refuge, one thought kept circling through my mind. How do you take legal action against the child you raised, the child you love? That night, lying in Linda's guest room, I stared at the ceiling and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of someone else's house. Across the street, the lights were on in my bedroom that Rachel and Derek had claimed. I thought about the money I'd willingly handed over at the bank. I thought about Rachel's promises, her hugs, her reassurances. I thought about Dr. Harrison's concerned face when I'd admitted giving away my pension. And I realized that trusting someone doesn't make you stupid. But continuing to trust them after they've betrayed you? That would be stupid. Tomorrow I would find a lawyer. Tomorrow I would fight back. But tonight I let myself cry for the daughter I'd lost, for the home I'd been forced from, and for the woman I'd been just hours ago who'd still believed her child would never hurt her. I woke in Linda's guest room to weak morning sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then memory crashed over me like a wave, and I had to press my hand to my chest, fighting the anxiety that made my heart race. My house. My daughter. The locks changed. It was all real. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted upstairs, and I heard Linda moving around in her kitchen. I forced myself out of bed, catching sight of myself in the dresser mirror. I looked old. Not just elderly. Old in a way that went beyond years. A weariness etched into every line of my face. Good morning, honey, Linda said when I shuffled downstairs in my same clothes from yesterday. I made breakfast. And I've been on the phone already. Already? Linda, it's barely 7 o'clock. I accepted the coffee she pressed into my hands gratefully. I called my nephew, Jeremy. Remember? He's a lawyer in the city. I told him what happened and he's furious. He gave me the name of someone local. Samuel Brooks, an attorney who specializes in elder law and property disputes. Linda slid a piece of paper across her kitchen table. His office opens at 9. I already called and made you an appointment for 10 o'clock. I stared at the paper, an address and phone number in Linda's neat handwriting, and felt tears prick my eyes again. Linda, I can't pay for an attorney. I have $93 left from my $100, and my next pension check doesn't come for 2 more weeks. Jeremy talked to Mr. Brooks already. He'll do a free consultation, and if he takes your case, he works on contingency for elder abuse cases. That means he doesn't get paid unless you win. Linda sat across from me, her expression fierce. Maggie, this is elder abuse. Financial exploitation. Your daughter stole from you and forced you out of your home. There are laws against this. Elder abuse. The words made me flinch. I thought of elder abuse as something that happened to other people, vulnerable people, people without family. Not to me. Not with my own daughter. I still can't believe she'd do this, I whispered. I keep thinking I'll wake up and it'll have been a nightmare. Eat something, Linda ordered, pushing a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon toward me. You need your strength. We have a lot to do today. At 10 o'clock exactly, Linda and I walked into the law offices of Samuel Brooks on Main Street, above the hardware store where Tom had bought supplies for his endless home improvement projects. The office was small but neat, with dark wood furniture and windows overlooking the street. Samuel Brooks was younger than I'd expected, maybe 55, with salt and pepper hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when we entered and shook my hand with a firm, reassuring grip. Mrs. Henderson, please sit down. Can I get you coffee? Water. Water would be nice, I managed. For the next hour I told him everything. He listened intently, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad, his expression growing increasingly grim. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Mrs. Henderson, may I call you Maggie? I nodded. Maggie, I'm going to be straight with you. This is going to be challenging, but it's not impossible. Let's start with what we have in your favor. First, you're the sole owner of the house. Your name is on the deed, correct? Yes. Tom and I bought it together, but when he passed, it transferred to just my name. Good. Second, you have a witness at the bank who can confirm you made that transfer under the representation that it was a loan. Do you remember the teller's name? Ashley. I don't know her last name, but she works at the First National Bank on Maple Street. Mr. Brooks made a note. We'll get a statement from her. Third, you have Officer Mills' report from yesterday, which documents that you were locked out and that Rachel claimed you had memory problems. That false allegation could actually help us. It shows a pattern of manipulation. But Officer Mills said it was a civil matter. She couldn't help. She was right, it is a civil matter. We can't have Rachel arrested for this. But we can file for an emergency eviction and get a restraining order. We can also potentially pursue criminal charges for financial exploitation of an elderly person. Though that's harder to prove since you did transfer the money willingly. I only transferred it because she lied to me, I protested. She said she'd pay me back. She promised. I believe you, Mr. Brooks said gently. But from a legal standpoint, proving fraud requires proving she intended to deceive you from the start. That's difficult. However, we don't need to prove fraud to get you back in your house. We just need to prove you're the legal owner, and that she's occupying it without a rental agreement or your permission. So what do we do first? Linda asked, her hand finding mine under the table. First, I'm filing an emergency motion today for a temporary restraining order and an immediate eviction order. I'll argue that Maggie is being financially exploited and that there's a risk of further harm. The judge will likely schedule a hearing within a week. In the meantime, Maggie, I need you to gather every piece of documentation you can find. The deed to your house, bank statements showing the transfer, any text messages or emails from Rachel about the loan. Anything that shows a pattern of her financial dependence on you. Most of my papers are in the house, I said helplessly. In my file cabinet in the bedroom. Do you have keys to anything? A mailbox key? Safety deposit box. My mail. I sat up straighter. I have a post office box. Rachel doesn't have access to it. My bank statements come there. Perfect. Get those statements today. Also, start keeping a detailed log of everything. Every time you try to contact Rachel, every time you see them at the house, everything they say to you. Documentation is crucial. We talked for another 30 minutes going over strategy and timelines. When we finally stood to leave, Mr. Brooks walked us to the door. Maggie, I want you to understand something. This is your daughter. Even if we win, and I think we have a good chance, this is going to damage or destroy your relationship with her. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Rachel's cold eyes yesterday, about Derek's sneering smile, about sleeping in Linda's guest room while strangers occupied my home. My relationship with my daughter ended the moment she changed those locks, I said quietly. The person living in my house right now? That's not the daughter I raised. That's someone I don't know anymore. Mr. Brooks nodded slowly. Then let's get your house back. Linda and I spent the afternoon gathering evidence. We went to the post office, where I collected 2 months of bank statements from my P.O. box. We went to the bank, where Ashley remembered me and agreed to write a statement about the transfer. Looking shocked when I explained what had happened, we stopped at the police station and got a copy of Officer Mill's report. By evening, we had a folder full of documentation. Linda made copies of everything on her home printer, organizing them into neat stacks on her dining room table. This is good, she kept saying. This is solid evidence, Maggie. But as darkness fell and I stood at Linda's window, looking across at my house where lights glowed warmly in every window, where Rachel and Derek were probably eating dinner in my kitchen, sitting on my furniture, sleeping in my bed, I felt a despair deeper than anything I'd experienced since Tom died. Because Mr. Brooks was right. Even if I won, I'd lost my daughter. Emma. The thought of my granddaughter hit me suddenly. Did Emma know what her mother had done? Would Rachel turn her against me? Linda, I said suddenly. I need to call Emma. Of course. Linda handed me her phone. I dialed Emma's cell number with shaking fingers. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Her cheerful 16-year-old voice. Hey, it's Emma. Leave a message. Emma, sweetheart, it's Grandma. I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me back at Mrs. Chen's number. I recited Linda's number and hung up. She didn't call back that night. I lay awake in Linda's guest room again, staring at the ceiling, and wondered how my life had fallen apart so completely in just 48 hours. Tomorrow, Mr. Brooks would file the motion. Tomorrow, I would start the legal fight to reclaim my home. But tonight I was still homeless, still broke, and still heartbroken. 5 days later, I sat in family court, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected from TV shows. Just a modest room with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and the seal of the state mounted on the wall behind the judge's bench. Mr. Brooks sat beside me, looking professional in a dark suit, papers organized neatly in front of him. Linda sat in the row behind us, her presence a comfort even though she couldn't do anything but offer moral support. Across the aisle, Rachel sat with a lawyer of her own, a young man in an expensive-looking suit who Derek had apparently called in a favor to get. Rachel wore a conservative navy dress and minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked responsible, concerned, like a dutiful daughter worried about her aging mother. She hadn't looked at me once since entering the courtroom. Derek wasn't there. Mr. Brooks had explained that since Derek wasn't on the deed and wasn't related to me, he had no legal standing in the case. But I knew he was outside, waiting, probably coaching Rachel on what to say. All rise for the Honorable Judge Christina Martinez, the bailiff announced. We stood as Judge Martinez entered, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that gave nothing away. She settled behind the bench, reviewed the papers in front of her for a long moment, then looked up. This is a motion for emergency eviction and temporary restraining order filed by Margaret Henderson against her daughter, Rachel Henderson. Let's start with the petitioner. Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks stood, and I was grateful for his calm, confident presence. Your Honor, this is a straightforward case of elder financial abuse and unlawful occupancy. Mrs. Margaret Henderson is a 68-year-old widow living on a fixed income. She is the sole legal owner of the property at 247 Sycamore Street, which she and her late husband purchased 40 years ago. He laid out the facts methodically. The loan Rachel requested, my transfer of $1,100, nearly my entire pension check, Rachel's promise to repay me by month's end, Her early return from vacation, the changed locks, my inability to access my own home. Mrs. Henderson was literally locked out of her own house, Your Honor. She has been staying with a neighbor for the past 5 days. She has no access to her clothing, her medications, her personal documents. The respondent's boyfriend, who has no legal right to be on the property at all, is currently residing there and has made threatening statements to Mrs. Henderson. Judge Martinez turned to Rachel's lawyer. Mr. Foster? Rachel's attorney stood, and when he spoke, his voice was smooth, sympathetic. Your Honor, this is a family dispute that's been blown completely out of proportion. My client, Rachel Henderson, is a registered nurse who works long hours at County Memorial Hospital. She's a single mother struggling to provide for her 16-year-old daughter, while also caring for her aging mother. I felt my jaw clench at the phrase aging mother, said with just enough emphasis to paint me as feeble, confused. Mrs. Margaret Henderson suffers from hypertension and has been showing early signs of cognitive decline. She's been forgetting to take her medications, leaving the stove on, neglecting home maintenance. My client became concerned for her mother's safety. The money Mrs. Henderson transferred to my client was a gift, freely given, to help my client who has been financially supporting her mother for years. That's not true, I whispered to Mr. Brooks, who touched my arm gently. Your Honor, Mr. Foster continued, my client changed the locks on the house for security reasons after Mrs. Henderson lost her keys twice in 1 month. She fully intended to give her mother a new key, but Mrs. Henderson left the house and hasn't returned. My client has been trying to contact her mother to give her the key and discuss living arrangements that would be safer for everyone. I never lost my keys, I said louder than I intended. Judge Martinez looked at me over her reading glasses. Mrs. Henderson, you'll have your chance to speak. Mr. Brooks, do you have evidence to counter these claims? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Brooks presented our documentation, bank statements showing I've been managing my finances independently for years, the bank teller's statement confirming Rachel's promise to repay the loan, Dr. Harrison's letter stating I had no cognitive impairment and simply needed to take my medications consistently, Officer Mills' report documenting the incident. I also have phone records showing that Rachel has not attempted to contact her mother in the past 5 days, contradicting Mr. Foster's claim that she's been trying to give her the new key. Mr. Brooks handed a stack of papers to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. Judge Martinez reviewed the documents silently. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Finally, she looked up. Mrs. Henderson, I'd like to hear from you directly. Can you tell me in your own words what happened? I stood on shaking legs, grateful when Mr. Brooks steadied me with a hand on my elbow. I looked at Judge Martinez, carefully avoiding Rachel's direction. Your Honor, I gave my daughter $1,100 because she asked me for a loan. She told me she needed a vacation because of stress, that her boyfriend had a big job coming that would allow her to pay me back before the end of the month. I trusted her. She's my daughter, my only child. Why wouldn't I trust her? My voice cracked, but I pushed on. I went to my doctor's appointment 5 days ago. When I came home, Derek's truck was in my driveway. My key didn't work. When they finally let me in, they told me they were moving into my house and I could live in the guest room. My guest room. In my own house. Mrs. Henderson, Judge Martinez said gently, do you have any cognitive impairment? Memory problems? Difficulty managing daily tasks? No, Your Honor. I've been living independently since my husband died 5 years ago. I volunteer at the library every Tuesday. I manage my own finances, pay my own bills, drive myself to appointments. The only reason I couldn't afford my medications this month was because I gave Rachel my pension check. Your Honor, if I may, Mr. Foster stood again. My client would like to address the court. Judge Martinez nodded and Rachel stood. This was the first time she'd moved since the hearing began, and I found myself holding my breath. Your Honor, Rachel's voice was soft, trembling slightly. I love my mother. I would never intentionally hurt her. She's right that I asked her for money, but she offered it freely. She said she wanted to help me because I've been so stressed. I opened my mouth to protest, but Mr. Brooks touched my arm again, shaking his head slightly. As for the house, Rachel continued, my mother's been struggling. I know she doesn't want to admit it, but I've seen it. Bills piling up. The yard getting overgrown. I thought if Derek and I moved in, we could help maintain the property, help with expenses. I changed the locks because she really had lost her keys, and I was worried about security. I was going to give her the new key, but she left before I could. Ms. Henderson, do you have any documentation that your mother lost her keys? Judge Martinez asked. Rachel hesitated. No, Your Honor. But she told me. Documentation, Ms. Henderson. Text messages? Emails? Calls to a locksmith? No, Your Honor. Judge Martinez made a note, then looked at both lawyers. I've heard enough for now. Here's my ruling. Mrs. Margaret Henderson is clearly the legal owner of the property. The deed is solely in her name, and there's no rental agreement or any other legal document giving the respondent right of occupancy. I felt a surge of hope. However, the judge continued, and my hope faltered. Ms. Rachel Henderson is the daughter of the property owner and has, according to both parties, lived at that address in the past. This creates a complicated situation regarding occupancy rights. No. Therefore, I'm issuing a temporary order. Ms. Rachel Henderson and her boyfriend must vacate the master bedroom immediately and return it to Mrs. Margaret Henderson's exclusive use. They may remain in the guest room for a period of 30 days, while they secure alternative housing. During this time, Mrs. Margaret Henderson will have full access to her entire home. All locks will be changed with keys provided to both parties, and there will be no harassment or intimidation of either party. Your Honor, Mr. Brooks started. I'm not finished, Mr. Brooks. After 30 days, if Ms. Rachel Henderson has not vacated the premises, Mrs. Henderson may return to this court for a formal eviction order. In the meantime, I'm ordering both parties to attend family mediation to see if this situation can be resolved without further court intervention. Bailiff, please provide them with the list of approved mediators. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. Next case. I stood there, numb with shock, as people began filing out of the courtroom. 30 days. Rachel got to stay in my house for 30 more days. Maggie, it's okay, Mr. Brooks said quickly, reading my expression. This isn't a loss. You get your bedroom back. You get to go home. And in 30 days we can evict her if she doesn't leave voluntarily. Judge Martinez is just being cautious because it's a family matter. 30 days, I repeated hollowly. I have to live with them for 30 days. You don't have to, Linda said fiercely, appearing at my side. You can stay with me. But I looked across the courtroom where Rachel was talking with her lawyer, carefully not looking in my direction, and felt something harden in my chest. No, I said. I'm going home. It's my house. I'm not letting them drive me out of my own home. Mr. Brooks looked concerned. Maggie, if you're sure. I'm sure. I straightened my shoulders, picked up my purse, and walked out of that courtroom with my head high. Behind me, I heard Rachel say something to her lawyer, her voice too low to make out the words. I didn't care. I was going home. The locksmith arrived at my house at 3 o'clock that afternoon. His name was Joe, a burly man in his 50s who'd owned the local hardware store for 20 years. Tom and I had bought our first lawnmower from him back in 1985. I heard about what happened, Maggie, Joe said quietly as he worked on my front door installing a new lock. Everyone on Sycamore Street is talking about it. Can't believe your Rachel would do something like this. I stood on my porch watching him work, very aware of the curtains twitching in my living room window. Rachel and Derek were inside, and the court order required them to be present for the lock change so everyone could get keys. Me neither, Joe, I said softly. When the new lock was installed, Joe handed me 2 keys, then knocked on the door. Derek opened it, his expression sour. Need you both to come sign for your keys, Joe said, his tone professional but cold. Rachel appeared behind Derek, still wearing that navy dress from court. She looked tired, and there were red circles around her eyes like she'd been crying. Good, I thought, then felt guilty for the thought. Joe handed them each a key and had them sign his paperwork, confirming they'd received copies. The whole transaction took less than 5 minutes and was conducted in complete silence except for Joe's instructions. When Joe left, I stood in my driveway, my own key clutched in my hand, facing my front door. My door. My house. But it didn't feel like coming home. It felt like entering enemy territory. Well, I said to no one in particular and walked inside. They'd cleaned up since I'd last been here. The beer bottles and takeout containers were gone from the coffee table. My family photos had been returned to the mantel, though not in their original positions. Derek's tools were stacked neatly in the corner of the living room. Rachel and Derek stood near the kitchen watching me. The silence was oppressive. "Your bedroom is clear," Rachel finally said, not meeting my eyes. "We moved our stuff to the guest room." "Thank you," I said stiffly, because what else was there to say? I walked down the hall to my bedroom, my heart pounding. The door was ajar and I pushed it open slowly. They had changed the sheets at least. The bed was made with my blue quilt, the one my mother had made for my wedding. My dresser had been cleaned off, my perfume bottles and jewelry box returned to their places. But it didn't smell right. It smelled like Rachel's perfume and Derek's cologne, like strangers had been sleeping in my bed. Because they had been. I set my purse on the dresser and sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. Through the wall I could hear muffled voices, Rachel and Derek talking in the guest room. I couldn't make out the words, but Derek's tone was angry. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in my own bed in my own house and listened to every sound. The guest room shared a wall with my bedroom, and I could hear everything. Their TV playing too loud, Derek's raised voice during an argument around 10 o'clock, Rachel crying around midnight. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Tom, about how different everything would be if he were still alive. Tom wouldn't have let this happen. Tom would have seen through Rachel's lies, would have protected me, would have known what to do. But Tom was gone and I was alone. The next morning, I emerged from my bedroom at 6 o'clock to find Derek already in my kitchen, making coffee in his undershirt and boxers. He glanced at me, smirked, and turned back to the coffee maker without a word. I wanted to say something, to tell him to put on decent clothes, to get out of my kitchen, to show some respect, but the words died in my throat. The court order said they could stay for 30 days. Technically, Derek wasn't even supposed to be here at all, but removing him would require another court hearing. So I said nothing. I waited until he finished with the coffee maker and left the kitchen, then made myself a cup of tea with shaking hands. This was my life now. For 30 days I would live as a prisoner in my own home. The first week was a Cold War. We moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when absolutely necessary. Rachel went to work early and came home late. Derek was always there, lounging on my couch, watching my TV, eating food he didn't pay for. He had a way of taking up space, of making his presence oppressive. Linda called every day. "Come stay with me," she pleaded. "You don't have to do this to yourself, Maggie." But I refused. This was my house. I wouldn't let them drive me out. Mr. Brooks called to check in. "The 30 days are almost up," he reminded me. "Unless Rachel shows signs of leaving voluntarily, we'll file for the formal eviction on day 31. I marked the days off on my calendar like a prisoner counting down a sentence. On day 8, Emma finally called. I was in my bedroom when my cell phone rang. Linda had insisted I keep her old phone, adding me to her plan so I'd have a way to communicate. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Grandma." Emma's voice was small, uncertain. "Emma. Oh, sweetheart, I've been so worried. Mom told me what happened." Emma's voice hardened. "How could you try to kick us out? Grandma, Mom's been taking care of you. She said you gave her that money because you couldn't afford the house anymore." My heart sank. Rachel had gotten to her first, poisoned her against me. "Emma, that's not what happened. Your mother asked me for a loan. She said you'd say that. She said you're getting confused, forgetting things. Grandma, are you okay? Are you sick?" "I'm not sick, Emma. I'm not confused. Your mother lied to me, took my money and locked me out of my house. I had to go to court just to get back into my own home." There was a long silence. Then, I don't know who to believe. The pain of that statement cut deeper than anything else. My granddaughter, whom I'd helped raise, whom I'd babysat every weekend, whom I'd taught to bake cookies and read books, she didn't know whether to believe me or her mother. "Emma, I have never lied to you. Not once in your entire life. I'm not lying now." Another pause. "I have to go. I'm at Dad's and he's calling me for dinner." "Emma, wait." But she'd already hung up. I sat on my bed, holding the silent phone, and let myself cry for the first time since the hearing. I thought I'd lost my daughter. I hadn't realized I was losing my granddaughter too. That night, I heard Rachel crying again through the wall. Part of me, a small stubborn part that still remembered her as my baby girl, wanted to go to her to comfort her the way I had when she was young and sad. But I didn't move. I lay in my bed and listened to her cry, and told myself that sympathy was a luxury I couldn't afford. The daughter I'd known was gone. The person in the next room had made her choices. And in 22 more days, she'd have to live with the consequences. Day 14 arrived with unseasonable warmth, one of those strange October days where the temperature climbed into the 70s and the sun felt like a false promise of summer. I woke early, as I had every morning since moving back in, and lay still, listening for sounds from the guest room. Silence. Maybe they were sleeping in. I rose, pulled on my robe, and ventured into the kitchen. The coffee maker was clean. Rachel had actually washed it after using it yesterday. Small mercies. I made myself tea and toast, standing at the counter rather than sitting at the table. Sitting felt too vulnerable somehow, too relaxed. I needed to stay alert. The mail slot in the front door rattled, and I heard the soft thud of letters hitting the floor. I retrieved them, sorting through the usual bills and advertisements, when I noticed an envelope from First National Bank. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a notice about my checking account. Apparently, I'd missed my property tax payment due on October 1st, the payment I'd scheduled before Rachel asked for the loan, before my money disappeared. The bank had covered it from my overdraft protection, but I now owed them $847 for the taxes plus $35 in overdraft fees. I sank into the kitchen chair, toast forgotten, staring at the notice. My next pension check would come in 3 days, but it would barely cover this. I'd have nothing left for utilities, food, or my medications. Something wrong. I looked up to find Rachel standing in the kitchen doorway, wearing scrubs for work. Her eyes looked puffy, tired. She'd been working double shifts again. I heard her come in after midnight most nights. My property taxes, I said, my voice flat. The ones I couldn't pay because I gave you my pension check. The bank covered them with overdraft, so now I owe even more. Rachel's expression flickered. Guilt, maybe, or regret, but it hardened quickly. I told you I'll pay you back when I can. Derek's got job interviews next week. You've been saying that for 2 weeks, Rachel. Derek sits on my couch all day, eating my food, watching my TV. I don't see him going to any job interviews. He's been looking. No, he hasn't. I stood up, surprising myself with the anger in my voice. I'm here all day. I see everything. He sleeps until noon, then plays video games on his phone. When I go out to volunteer at the library, Linda tells me he doesn't leave the house. He's not looking for work, Rachel. He's freeloading. Off both of us. Rachel's face flushed. You don't know anything about Derek's situation. I know he's a parasite. The word exploded out of me. 2 weeks of suppressed fury finally breaking through. I know he convinced you to steal from your own mother. I know he's the one who suggested taking over my house, because you never would have thought of something so cruel on your own. Derek didn't. He's trying to help. Help? He's helping himself to my home while you work yourself to death trying to support him. I slammed the bank notice on the table. Wake up, Rachel. He's using you and he's using me, and you're too blind to see it. Don't talk about Derek that way. Rachel's voice rose to match mine. He loves me. He's the only person who's been there for me since the divorce. I've been there for you. I gave you money whenever you needed it. I babysat Emma for years so you could work. I helped you through the divorce, through every crisis, through everything. And this is how you repay me. Mother and daughter, we stood in my kitchen. Years of unspoken resentments finally pouring out. You've always been so judgmental, Rachel said, her voice shaking. Nothing I do is ever good enough for you. You love Dad more than me. You probably love Emma more than me too. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. Rachel, that's not true. I've always loved you. Then why can't you just help us? Rachel's anger crumbled into something that looked like desperation. Why can't you understand that, Derek, and I need a fresh start? This house is too big for you anyway. You can't maintain it. You're getting older, Mom. Why can't we all just share it? Because it's my house. I shouted. Because you didn't ask, you stole. You lied to me, Rachel. You promised to pay me back, knowing you never would. You changed my locks and tried to force me into the guest room. And now you're trying to make me feel guilty for wanting my own home back. Well, maybe if you'd been a better mother, I wouldn't have had to. Don't you dare. My voice dropped to something quiet and dangerous. Don't you dare try to blame your choices on me. I wasn't a perfect mother, but I was a good one. I loved you. I sacrificed for you. And this? I gestured around the kitchen at the whole situation. This is all on you. You made these choices, Rachel. You, not me. We stared at each other across the kitchen, the chasm between us now impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about money or the house. This was about trust shattered, about love betrayed, about a relationship that couldn't be repaired. The front door slammed open, making us both jump. Derek stormed in, clearly having heard our raised voices from wherever he'd been lurking. That's enough, he bellowed. Rachel, get your stuff. We're leaving. Derek, Rachel started. Now. He grabbed her arm hard enough that Rachel winced. I'm not staying in this house another day with this ungrateful old bitch. Get your hands off my daughter, I said, my voice deadly calm. Derek turned to me, and the look in his eyes was pure hatred. Or what, old woman? You gonna call the cops again? They couldn't help you last time. I said, get your hands off her. I pulled my cell phone from my robe pocket. You have a court order to be gone in 16 days. But if you touch her like that again, I'll have you arrested for domestic violence right now. For a moment I thought Derek might actually hit me. His fists clenched, his face reddened, and I saw Rachel's eyes widen with something that looked like fear. But he released Rachel's arm and took a step back, his jaw working. Derek, please, Rachel said softly. Let's just go to work. We can talk about this later. Fine. Derek stormed out, slamming the front door so hard a picture fell off the wall in the living room. Rachel and I stood in the sudden silence, breathing hard. Then Rachel moved toward the front door, moving like a woman much older than 42. Rachel, I said, and she paused, not turning around. He hurt you just now. You saw that, right? The way he grabbed you. He's just stressed, Rachel said quietly. That's what they all say. That's what every woman in an abusive relationship says. I moved closer to her, desperate to break through. Sweetheart, Derek is not good for you. This whole situation, it's toxic. But you can still walk away. You can leave him, get your own place, and we can work on repairing our relationship. It's not too late. Rachel's shoulders trembled, and for a moment I thought I'd reached her. Then she straightened, turned, and looked at me with eyes that had gone cold again. You don't understand anything, Mom. You had Dad, perfect, wonderful Tom who never did anything wrong. You don't know what it's like to be alone, to need someone, to finally find someone who wants to be with you. Rachel, there are better. I have to go to work. She walked out, closing the door gently behind her. I stood in my living room, looking at the picture that had fallen. A photo of Rachel at her high school graduation, smiling and bright-eyed and full of hope. The glass had cracked across her face. I picked it up carefully and carried it to my bedroom, setting it on my dresser. Then I sat on my bed and called Mr. Brooks. Samuel? It's Maggie Henderson. I need to know, is there any way to speed up the eviction? Can we do it before the 30 days are up? What happened? He asked, his voice immediately alert. I told him about Derek grabbing Rachel, about the confrontation. When I finished, there was a long pause. If you're willing to testify that Derek was physically aggressive toward Rachel, we might be able to get an emergency protective order that would require him to leave immediately. But Rachel would have to cooperate, and from what you're telling me, she won't, I finished. She's defending him. Then I'm sorry, Maggie. We're stuck with the 30-day order. 16 more days. 16 more days of this torture. 16 more days of living in fear in my own home. 16 more days of watching my daughter throw her life away on a man who would destroy her. Maggie, are you still there? I'm here, I said. I'll make it through 16 more days. I made it through Tom's death. I can make it through this. But as I hung up and lay back on my bed, I wasn't sure I believed my own words. Through the wall, I heard the guest room door slam. Derek had returned. His voice, raised and angry, filtered through the wall, though I couldn't make out words. Just tone, accusatory, cruel, relentless. Rachel's voice responding, quieter, pleading. I put my pillow over my head and prayed for the days to pass quickly. Day 27. 3 days until Derek and Rachel would be legally required to leave my house, and I could finally breathe again. I marked it on my calendar with a red X like I'd been doing each morning, a countdown to freedom. I was in the kitchen making lunch, a simple sandwich, trying to stretch my groceries until my pension check arrived tomorrow, when I heard the guest room door open. Rachel emerged, and I nearly dropped my knife when I saw her face. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut, the skin around it a spectacular mess of purple and black. Her lower lip was split, with dried blood crusted at the corner. She moved stiffly like her ribs hurt. Rachel. I dropped everything and rushed to her. My God, what happened? Did Derek? I fell, Rachel said quickly, not meeting my eyes. Last night, coming home from work. It was dark and I tripped on the porch steps. Rachel, don't lie to me. Not about this. I reached toward her face, but she flinched away. Please. Let me help you. There's nothing to help with. I fell. End of story. Rachel moved past me into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator and staring into it without taking anything out. Her hands were shaking. Where is Derek? He went out. Said he needed air. I thought about Officer Mills' card still in my wallet. I thought about protective orders and domestic violence hotlines and all the resources I'd been researching for the past week. Knowing this was coming, dreading it. Rachel, listen to me. You don't have to stay with him. We can call the police right now. They can remove him from the house. Get you a protective order. I said I fell. Rachel whirled on me, her eyes, her one visible eye blazing. Why can't you just accept that? Why do you always have to push? Because you're my daughter and someone hurt you, and I will not stand by and watch it happen. My voice broke. Rachel, please. I know we've said terrible things to each other. I know our relationship is broken right now, but I still love you. I will always love you. And I cannot watch this man destroy you. For a long moment, Rachel just stared at me. Then her face crumpled, and she sank into a kitchen chair, sobbing. I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms the way I had when she was small and hurting. She buried her face against my shoulder and cried, deep wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. He's changed, she said through the tears. Since we came here, he's been so angry all the time. Last night we were fighting about money and he lost control. This isn't the first time, is it? I asked gently, stroking her hair. Rachel shook her head against my shoulder. There were other times. Small things. A shove here, a grab there. But last night was different. I thought he was going to kill me, Mom. I really thought. Shoo. It's okay. You're safe now. I held her tighter. We're going to fix this. Right now. Together. I helped Rachel to the living room couch and grabbed my phone, dialing the domestic violence hotline number I'd memorized. The woman who answered was calm, professional, and compassionate. She talked me through the steps. Documenting the injuries with photos, calling the police, filing for a protective order. Mom, I don't know if I can do this, Rachel said as I took pictures of her face with my phone camera. Each click felt like capturing evidence of my worst parenting fears realized. You can. You're stronger than you think. I sat beside her, taking her hand. And you're not alone. I'm here. We'll get through this together. We called the police. Officer Mills arrived within 20 minutes, and this time the visit was very different. She took Rachel's statement, photographed the injuries from multiple angles, and filed a report for domestic violence. Miss Henderson, I'm going to be direct with you, Officer Mills said, sitting across from Rachel in my living room. Based on your statement and these injuries, I can arrest Derek Foster when we locate him. But I need to know, are you willing to press charges? Rachel looked at me, her good eye wide and frightened. I squeezed her hand. It's your choice, sweetheart. Whatever you decide, I support you. If I press charges, he'll be so angry, Rachel whispered. If you don't, he'll do it again, Officer Mills said gently. Statistics show that domestic violence escalates over time. The next time might be worse. You need to protect yourself. Rachel closed her eyes, a few more tears sliding down her bruised cheek. Then she nodded. Okay. Yes. I'll press charges. Officer Mills made notes, then looked at me. Mrs. Henderson, Do you have somewhere else you and your daughter can stay tonight? Once we arrest Derek, he'll be released on bail eventually, and he might try to come back here. She can stay with me, Linda said from the doorway. I hadn't even heard her come in. She had the spare key I'd given her weeks ago. She must have seen the police car and rushed over. Both of you. I have plenty of room. Actually, I said slowly, an idea forming. Rachel can stay with Linda. I'm staying here. This is my house and I'm not leaving it again. Mom, that's not safe. I'll be fine. Officer Mills, you said Derek would be arrested. As soon as we find him, we'll put out a call right now. Do you know where he might be? Rachel gave them the names of Derek's usual haunts: a bar on the east side of town, his friend Mike's apartment, the construction company where he occasionally picked up day work. Officer Mills radioed in the information and promised to call as soon as they had him in custody. After the police left, Linda helped me pack a bag for Rachel. Clothes, toiletries, her work ID badge. Rachel moved through the house like a ghost, touching things gently. The mantel where her childhood photos sat, the window where she used to watch for the school bus, the kitchen table where we'd had so many meals as a family. I'm sorry, Mom, she said as Linda led her toward the door. I'm so sorry for everything. The money, the house, the things I said. We'll have time to talk about all of that later, I said, hugging her carefully so I wouldn't hurt her injuries. Right now, you just focus on healing. The rest we can figure out together. After they left, the house felt impossibly quiet. Statistics show that domestic violence escalates over time. The next time might be worse. You need to protect yourself. Rachel closed her eyes, a few more tears sliding down her bruised cheek. Then she nodded. Okay. Yes. I'll press charges. Officer Mills made notes, then looked at me. Mrs. Henderson, do you have somewhere else you and your daughter can stay tonight? Once we arrest Derek, he'll be released on bail eventually, and he might try to come back here. She can stay with me, Linda said from the doorway. I hadn't even heard her come in. She had the spare key I'd given her weeks ago. She must have seen the police car and rushed over. Both of you. I have plenty of room. Actually, I said slowly, an idea forming. Rachel can stay with Linda. I'm staying here. This is my house and I'm not leaving it again. Mom, that's not safe. I'll be fine. Officer Mills, you said Derek would be arrested. As soon as we find him, we'll put out a call right now. Do you know where he might be? Rachel gave them the names of Derek's usual haunts: a bar on the east side of town, his friend Mike's apartment, the construction company where he occasionally picked up day work. Officer Mills radioed in the information and promised to call as soon as they had him in custody. After the police left, Linda helped me pack a bag for Rachel. Clothes, toiletries, her work ID badge. Rachel moved through the house like a ghost, touching things gently. The mantel where her childhood photos sat, the window where she used to watch for the school bus, the kitchen table where we'd had so many meals as a family. I'm sorry, Mom, she said as Linda led her toward the door. I'm so sorry for everything. The money, the house, the things I said. We'll have time to talk about all of that later, I said, hugging her carefully so I wouldn't hurt her injuries. Right now, you just focus on healing. The rest we can figure out together. After they left, the house felt impossibly quiet. Maybe stay with your neighbor for a few days until we have him in custody. But I shook my head. This is my house. I fought too hard to get it back. I'm not leaving. After the officers left, I finished packing Derek's things and dragged the garbage bags out to the curb. Tomorrow was trash day. How fitting. That night, I lay in my bed in my house, finally free of unwanted occupants, and thought about Rachel. I thought about the bruised, frightened woman I'd held in my arms this morning, and about the cold stranger who'd taken my money and locked me out. Both of them were my daughter. Both were real. Somewhere in between was the person Rachel actually was, the person she could be again if she chose recovery over destruction. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Rachel's asleep. She's safe. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I typed back. Thank you for taking care of her. That's what friends do. And Maggie, you did good today. You saved her. I set down the phone and looked at the ceiling of my bedroom. The ceiling Tom and I had painted together 35 years ago, choosing a soft cream color that caught the morning light just right. I thought the battle was about getting my house back, but it had really been about something bigger. About refusing to let someone I loved destroy herself. About finding the courage to fight, even when the enemy was your own child. About learning that sometimes love means setting boundaries instead of giving in. Tomorrow Derek would likely be arrested. In 2 days my pension check would arrive, and I could start putting my life back together financially. Rachel would heal, physically and hopefully emotionally. And I would finally have my home back. Not just the building but the peace, the safety, the sanctuary it was supposed to be. For tonight that was enough. 33 days after Rachel first asked me for that loan, I stood in my kitchen making coffee. Real coffee, not just tea to save money, and watched the autumn sun paint golden streaks across my newly cleaned countertops. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet now. A peaceful quiet. Derek had been arrested 2 days after Rachel left. He'd gone to his friend Mike's apartment, gotten drunk, and started a bar fight that brought the police. When they ran his name, the warrant came up. He was currently in county jail, held on domestic violence charges with a bail set high enough that he couldn't afford to post it. Rachel had a 5-year restraining order against him. Rachel herself was still staying with Linda, though we'd had lunch together 3 times in the past week. The conversations were awkward, careful, like we were learning how to be mother and daughter again after years apart, even though it had only been a month. She was in therapy, individual counseling to process the abusive relationship, and we'd started family therapy together to work through our own issues. I think I was jealous, Rachel had admitted in our second session, tears streaming down her healing face. You and Dad had such a perfect relationship. He died and you still had this house, this life, all these memories. I felt like I had nothing. I was divorced, struggling financially, dating men who didn't really care about me. And when Derek came along, he seemed different at first. He made me feel wanted. And then when things started getting bad, I was too proud to admit I'd made another mistake. So you took it out on me, I'd said gently. Not accusatorily, just stating a fact. Yeah, I did. And I'm so sorry, Mom. Sorry didn't erase what had happened. Sorry didn't give me back the month of anxiety and fear and homelessness. But sorry was a start and I was willing to see where it led. My pension check had arrived on schedule, and I'd used it to catch up on bills and refill my medications. The bank had been surprisingly understanding about the overdraft situation once I explained the circumstances. They'd even waived the fees after Officer Mills confirmed my elder abuse report. I was back on solid financial ground, living within my means again. Emma had called yesterday. She was still at her father's house but wanted to come visit next weekend. I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first, Grandma, she'd said, her voice small and ashamed. Mom explained everything. What really happened. I should have trusted you. You were caught in the middle, sweetheart. That's not your fault. I'm just glad you called. Can we bake cookies when I visit? Like we used to. Of course we can. Chocolate chip. Obviously. I could hear the smile in her voice, and it warmed something in my chest that had been cold for too long. Now, coffee in hand, I walked through my house and took inventory of what I'd reclaimed. The living room rearranged to my liking, with my photos back in their proper places and a new throw pillow I'd bought myself. Lavender, Tom's favorite color. The kitchen, stocked with groceries I'd carefully budgeted for. My bedroom with fresh sheets and the window open to let in the autumn breeze. The guest room empty now, but I'd already decided what to do with it. I was going to turn it into a proper craft room, somewhere to do the quilting I'd always meant to get back to, maybe even take up painting like I'd talked about with Tom before he died. Not a room for unwanted guests or family members who'd betrayed me. A room for me, for hobbies and joy in creative pursuits. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Mr. Brooks standing on my porch, holding a folder. Samuel. Come in. Coffee. I'd love some, thank you. He followed me to the kitchen, and I poured him a cup, noticing how comfortable it felt to have a guest in my home again. A welcome guest. So, he said, opening his folder, I have good news. The bank has agreed to testify about the circumstances of the money transfer. If we decide to pursue criminal charges for financial exploitation, the district attorney thinks we have a strong case. I sat across from him at my kitchen table and considered this. Criminal charges would mean Rachel could face fines, possibly even jail time. It would be the ultimate vindication, proof that what she did was not just morally wrong but legally wrong. But it would also destroy any chance of rebuilding our relationship. What do you think I should do? I asked. Mr. Brooks took a sip of coffee, choosing his words carefully. As your attorney, I'd say you have every right to pursue this. What Rachel did was elder abuse, plain and simple. She deserves to face consequences. And as a person? He smiled slightly. As a person? I'd say that's not my decision to make. Only you know whether justice or mercy better serves your future. I thought about Rachel at Linda's house, healing from Derek's violence, trying to rebuild her life. I thought about our therapy sessions, about the genuine remorse I'd seen in her eyes. I thought about Emma, who needed her mother and her grandmother in her life, who'd already been through one parent's divorce and didn't need to endure a parent's incarceration. And I thought about Tom, who'd always believed in second chances, who'd taught me that forgiveness wasn't about letting people off the hook. It was about refusing to let their mistakes define your future. I don't want to press criminal charges, I said. What Rachel did was terrible, and I'm not forgetting it. But she's in therapy, she's away from Derek, and she's trying to make amends. I think that's punishment enough. And honestly, I'd rather spend my energy rebuilding than destroying. Mr. Brooks nodded, making notes. I'll inform the district attorney. They may choose to pursue it anyway. Elder abuse cases are often prosecuted even without the victim's cooperation. But your wishes will carry significant weight. Thank you, Samuel, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. That's what I'm here for. He finished his coffee and stood. You're a remarkable woman, Maggie. Not many people could have handled this situation with such grace. After he left, I stood at my kitchen window and looked out at my backyard. The lawn needed mowing. It had grown shaggy over the past month. Tom's old mower was in the garage, probably still working. Maybe I'd tackle it this weekend. Or maybe I'd hire the neighborhood teenager to do it. What was his name? Justin. He'd mowed for the Pattersons last summer. The phone rang, and I smiled when I saw Linda's number. Hey friend. How's Rachel this morning? Better. She ate a good breakfast, and she's getting ready for her shift at the hospital. Listen, she wanted me to ask you something. She's embarrassed to ask directly. What is it? She needs to start looking for her own apartment. She can't afford much on her salary, but she wants to know. Would you be willing to co-sign a lease? She knows it's asking a lot after everything, but her credit is shot from the Derek years and… Yes, I interrupted. I'll co-sign. There was a pause. Maggie, are you sure? You don't have to. I know I don't have to. But she's my daughter and she's trying to get back on her feet. I can do this one thing to help. With conditions, of course. Of course. What conditions? She stays in therapy. She maintains the restraining order against Derek. And she pays me back the $1,100. Not all at once, but $50 a month until it's paid off. That's 22 months. If she can stick to that, we'll be okay. I heard Linda relay this to Rachel, heard Rachel's muffled response. Then Linda came back on the line. She agrees. All of it. And Maggie? She's crying right now. Happy tears. After we hung up, I poured myself a second cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table. The table where I'd made the mistake of agreeing to loan Rachel that money, the table where we'd fought, the table where we'd have to rebuild our relationship one awkward conversation at a time. The house settled around me, familiar creaks and sighs. Tom's presence felt strong today. Not in a ghost sort of way, but in the way someone you love deeply stays with you even after they're gone. He'd be proud of how I'd fought for this home. He'd probably tell me I was being too easy on Rachel by not pressing criminal charges. We'd have one of our gentle arguments about it, and eventually, he'd admit I had a point. I missed him. I'd always miss him. But I was learning that you could be lonely and still be okay, that you could be hurt by people you loved and still choose to love them, that home wasn't just a building. It was a feeling of safety and peace that no one could take from you unless you let them. Through my kitchen window, I watched Mrs. Patterson walking her dog, saw Mr. Kim from 2 houses down checking his mailbox, noticed the Johnsons' teenager washing their car in the driveway. Normal suburban life on Sycamore Street, continuing as it always had, indifferent to the drama that had unfolded in my little white house with blue shutters. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Can we make snickerdoodles too? I found Grandpa Tom's recipe. I smiled and typed back, Absolutely. Bring your appetite. The autumn sun climbed higher, burning off the morning fog, and I sat in my kitchen, and made a list of things I wanted to do. Fix the loose board on the porch. Repaint the guest room before converting it to a craft room. Buy new towels for the bathroom, something bright and cheerful. Maybe even get a cat. I'd always wanted a cat, but Tom had been allergic. Small things. Normal things. The building blocks of a life reclaimed. I'd survived my daughter's betrayal. I'd fought for my home and won. I'd set boundaries and offered second chances in equal measure. I'd learned that strength wasn't about never falling apart. It was about pulling yourself back together and moving forward. And as I sat there planning my future in the house I'd fought so hard to keep, I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living again.